A family of 3 drives into the Oklahoma mountains and vanishes without a trace. Their truck is found, engine off, money inside, their beloved dog starving in the back seat. No signs of struggle, no clear motive. When their remains are finally discovered years later, the mystery only deepens. What really happened to the Jamison family? October 8, 2009. A crisp autumn morning in rural Oklahoma. The Jamison family, Bobby, age 44, his wife Sherilyn, 40, and their 6-year-old daughter Madison, loaded into their pickup truck for what should have been a routine day trip. They were heading to the Sans Bois Mountains, about 30 miles from their home in Eufaula, to look at a 40-acre plot of land they were considering purchasing. What happened to the Jamison family remains one of Oklahoma's most baffling unsolved mysteries. A case that would confound investigators for over 4 years, filled with bizarre evidence, conflicting theories, and questions that still haunt those who knew them. To understand what might have happened to the Jamisons, we need to understand who they were. Bobby Dale Jamison was a mechanic and handyman, known around Eufaula as someone who could fix just about anything. Friends described him as intelligent but somewhat reclusive, a man who preferred working with his hands to socializing. His wife, Sherilyn, went by Sherry to most people. She was a stay-at-home mother devoted to their daughter Madison, a bright 6-year-old who loved animals and playing outdoors. The family lived modestly in Eufaula, a small town of about 3,000 people in eastern Oklahoma, situated along the shores of Lake Eufaula. To outsiders, they appeared to be a typical American family trying to make ends meet in rural America. But beneath the surface of this seemingly ordinary family, there were complexities and struggles that would later fuel intense speculation about their fate. Bobby had been dealing with chronic back pain that affected his ability to work consistently. He'd been prescribed pain medication, and some family members later wondered if this had created additional stress in the household. Sherry, meanwhile, had become increasingly interested in spiritual matters, particularly what she believed were supernatural occurrences in their home. She had confided to several people that she thought their house was haunted and that she was experiencing paranormal activity. Their marriage, according to court documents that would later surface, had been strained. Financial pressures, Bobby's health issues, and what some described as Sherry's growing obsession with the paranormal had created tension between the couple. Despite these challenges, those who knew them said that both Bobby and Sherry were devoted parents to Madison, who was described by her teacher as a sweet, intelligent child who loved reading and playing with animals. That Thursday morning, October 8, 2009, the Jamisons set out for Red Oak, a remote area near the Sans Bois Mountains. They were meeting with a local man about purchasing a 40-acre plot of land, a dream of finding somewhere peaceful to build a new life away from the pressures of town life. The property was heavily wooded and isolated, accessible only by rough dirt roads, the kind of place where you might not see another soul for days. Bobby had told family members that he was excited about the possibility of moving to the country, where he could work on cars in peace and maybe do some hunting and fishing. Sherry seemed enthusiastic about the idea of living closer to nature, away from what she perceived as negative influences in town. For Madison, it would mean changing schools and leaving friends behind, but her parents believed the rural lifestyle would be better for all of them. The family loaded into their blue pickup truck that morning, bringing along their small white terrier, a beloved family pet. They packed lightly, just what they thought they'd need for a day trip to look at property. None of their neighbors or family members who saw them leave that morning had any reason to think they wouldn't return home that evening. What happened next can only be pieced together from the evidence they left behind and the final glimpses of them captured on security cameras. 8 days passed with no word from the family. This wasn't entirely unusual. Bobby sometimes took on jobs that kept him away for several days, and cell phone service in the Sans Bois Mountains was notoriously poor. But when Madison failed to show up for school and the family missed several appointments, Concerned relatives contacted the authorities. On October 16, 2009, a local hunter making his way through the dense forest made a discovery that would launch one of Oklahoma's most intensive missing persons investigations. Deep in the Sans Bois Mountains, parked on a narrow dirt road about 3 miles from where the family had planned to view the property, sat the Jamison's blue pickup truck. The truck was positioned facing away from the main road, as if the family had driven deeper into the wilderness rather than heading home. The doors were locked. The windows were rolled up. The truck appeared undamaged, with no signs of an accident or struggle. But inside, investigators would find something that made no sense at all. What police discovered in and around that truck would generate more questions than answers, creating a puzzle that seemed to defy logical explanation. The family's belongings were scattered throughout the vehicle: Sherry's purse, Bobby's wallet, Madison's small pink purse that she carried everywhere, cell phones, and car keys. Nothing appeared to have been stolen. Their identification, credit cards, and small amounts of cash in their wallets remained untouched. But it was what investigators found hidden beneath the driver's seat that truly baffled them. Tucked away in a bag was over $32,000 in cash. $32,000. In small bills, mostly 20s and 50s, bundled together with rubber bands. The money appeared old and worn, as if it had been accumulated over time rather than withdrawn from a bank all at once. The discovery of such a large sum of money immediately raised red flags for investigators. Why would a family of modest means be carrying around more than $30,000 in cash? Where had the money come from? And if robbery had been the motive for whatever happened to the family, why was this substantial sum left untouched? In the back seat of the truck, barely alive and severely dehydrated, was the family's small white terrier. The dog had somehow survived 8 days alone in the locked vehicle, sustained only by licking condensation from the windows. The animal's condition was critical. It was weak, emaciated, and suffering from severe dehydration. The fact that the dog was still alive suggested the family had been gone for most of those 8 days. But it raised another troubling question. Why would Bobby, Sherry, and Madison leave their beloved pet behind to suffer? The truck itself told a story of the family's final hours. The gas tank was nearly empty, suggesting they had driven around the area extensively before parking where the vehicle was found. Muddy footprints around the truck indicated that all 3 family members had gotten out of the vehicle, but the trail disappeared quickly in the rocky, uneven terrain. Inside the truck, investigators found maps of the local area with several locations circled, including the property they had planned to view. There were also handwritten directions and phone numbers related to the land purchase. Everything suggested this was a planned trip, not a spontaneous decision to disappear. Perhaps most puzzling was the truck's GPS system, which showed the family's movements on their final day. The data revealed that they had driven around the remote area for several hours, visiting multiple locations before parking where the truck was eventually found. They had backtracked several times, suggesting either that they were lost or that they were being very thorough in examining different parts of the property. Security footage from a gas station in Henrietta, Oklahoma, taken on the morning of October 8th, would later provide what may have been the last confirmed sighting of the Jamison family alive. The grainy footage showed all 3 family members walking back and forth from their truck to a storage building behind the gas station. Their movements appeared strange, almost methodical and emotionless. Bobby could be seen carrying items from the truck to the building and back again, making multiple trips. His movements seemed agitated, and he repeatedly looked over his shoulder as if he feared they were being watched or followed. Sherry and Madison also made several trips, but their behavior appeared equally odd. They moved with an almost robotic precision that struck investigators as unnatural. The footage raised more questions than it answered. What were they storing or retrieving from the building? Why did their behavior seem so strange? And why did Bobby appear so paranoid, constantly checking behind him as if expecting trouble? This would be the last time anyone could definitively say they had seen the Jamison family alive. After leaving the gas station, they disappeared into the remote wilderness of the Sans Bois Mountains, leaving behind only their truck, their belongings, and a series of clues that seemed to contradict each other. The condition of the truck and its contents suggested that whatever happened to the family had occurred quickly. There were no signs of a struggle inside the vehicle, no blood, no damage to indicate violence had occurred there. It appeared that the family had simply gotten out of their truck and walked away, taking nothing with them except possibly the clothes on their backs. But walked away to where? And why? Investigators launched an extensive search of the rugged terrain around where the truck was found. The search operation was massive, involving multiple agencies and hundreds of volunteers. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras swept the dense forest canopy. Ground teams with search dogs combed through ravines, caves, and thick underbrush. The terrain was unforgiving: steep hills, dense woods, rocky outcroppings, and numerous caves that dotted the landscape like hidden chambers. The Sans Bois Mountains are part of the Ouachita Mountain Range, characterized by dense forests of oak, hickory, and pine trees. The area is known for its rugged beauty but also for its danger. It's easy to get lost in the maze of dirt roads and game trails that crisscross the region. Wild animals, including bears and mountain lions, inhabit the area, and the terrain includes deep ravines and unstable rocky areas where a person could easily fall and become trapped. Search teams focused their efforts in a radius around the truck, operating on the assumption that the family couldn't have traveled far on foot, especially with a 6-year-old child. They searched in expanding circles, covering hundreds of square miles over several weeks. Divers searched ponds and creeks in the area. Cave rescue teams explored the numerous limestone caves that honeycomb the region. The search was complicated by the dense vegetation and the fact that the area had experienced recent rainfall, which could have washed away tracks or other evidence of the family's passage. Dogs trained to track human scent were brought in from multiple agencies, but they found no clear trail leading away from the truck. Investigators also had to consider the possibility that the family had been picked up by someone else, either voluntarily or against their will. They canvassed the area, speaking with local residents, hunters, and anyone else who might have been in the vicinity on October 8th or in the days following. Despite extensive interviews, no one reported seeing the Jamison family after the gas station footage was recorded. After weeks of intensive searching, they found nothing. No clothing, no footprints that could be definitively linked to the family, no personal items, no sign that Bobby, Sherry, and Madison had ever left the immediate area around their truck. It was as if 3 people had simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind only their vehicle and more questions than answers. As the years passed with no trace of the Jamisons, many theories emerged, but none could explain it all. The case drew in amateur sleuths, detectives, and conspiracy theorists. Theory 1. The $32,000 in their truck led some to suspect drug involvement. The area was known for meth labs. Maybe the family stumbled onto a drug deal or was involved themselves. But there were holes. If they were killed over drugs, why leave the money behind? And no clear ties to drug dealing were found. Theory 2. Some thought Bobby killed his family, then himself. Their marriage was troubled, and Bobby was fighting with his father over land. A bitter letter from Sherry to Bobby was found. But no weapon ever turned up, and those who knew Bobby doubted he'd harm his daughter. Theory 3. Sherry believed their house was haunted. She spoke of spirits and demons, and the couple sought help from a pastor. Some think they went to the mountains for a spiritual reason, or maybe something darker. But no real evidence backs this idea. Theory 4. Others suggested they staged their disappearance. maybe entering witness protection or starting fresh. The cash could have been for a new life. But why leave their dog? And why abandon the money? Theory 5. Perhaps they got lost or injured while exploring. The wilderness is rough, and bad weather could have made things worse. But it's unclear why they'd leave their truck, supplies, and dog behind. In the end, every theory leaves questions unanswered. For over 4 years, the Jamison family case remained unsolved, gradually fading from headlines but never from the minds of investigators and the families left behind. The case files remained open, and detectives continued to follow up on occasional tips and leads. But as time passed, hope for finding answers began to diminish. Then, on November 16, 2013, 2 hunters scouting deer hunting locations in the dense woods of the Sans Bois Mountains made a discovery that would thrust the case back into the spotlight. The hunters, who were familiar with the area and had been following game trails through particularly thick forest, noticed something unusual among the fallen leaves and undergrowth. Scattered across a small clearing, partially hidden by years of accumulated forest debris, were human bones. The skeletal remains were dispersed over an area of roughly 50 feet, suggesting that animals had disturbed and scattered them over time. The hunters immediately contacted authorities, who secured the scene and began the careful process of recovery and analysis. The location where the remains were found was less than 3 miles from where the Jamison's truck had been discovered over 4 years earlier. The site was in a heavily wooded area, down a steep slope from any road or trail. It would have been nearly impossible to spot the remains from any distance, and only someone walking directly through that particular section of forest would have been likely to find them. The recovery process was meticulous and heartbreaking. Forensic teams spent days carefully mapping the site and collecting every piece of bone and potential evidence they could find. The remains were incomplete, many bones were missing, likely carried away by scavengers over the years. What they found included portions of 3 skeletons, 2 adults and 1 child. It took nearly a year for forensic examination to confirm what investigators and the families had suspected. These were the remains of Bobby, Sherry, and Madison Jamison. Dental records and DNA analysis provided the definitive identification that had been hoped for but dreaded by everyone involved in the case. The discovery of the bodies should have provided answers. Instead, it only deepened the mystery surrounding the family's fate. The remains were found relatively close together, suggesting the family had died in the same general location. The positioning of the bones indicated that they had been there for several years, consistent with the timeline of their disappearance. However, due to the advanced state of decomposition and the fact that many bones were missing, likely scattered by animals over the intervening years, the medical examiner faced significant challenges in determining a cause of death. The bones that were recovered showed no obvious signs of trauma. No bullet holes, no evidence of blunt force trauma, no indication of how these 3 people had died. The absence of obvious trauma didn't rule out violence. Soft tissue injuries wouldn't be visible on bones that had been exposed to the elements for over 4 years. Strangulation, suffocation, poisoning, or other methods of killing that don't damage bones would leave no trace on skeletal remains. Similarly, the bones showed no evidence of animal attacks or other natural causes of death. The condition and location of the remains raised additional questions. How had the family ended up in such a remote, difficult-to-reach location? The area where they were found was down a steep slope, through dense undergrowth, in terrain that would have been challenging to navigate even in daylight with proper equipment. It seemed unlikely that the family would have wandered there on their own, especially with a 6-year-old child. The discovery also failed to provide any additional evidence about what had happened to the family. No personal belongings were found with the remains. No weapons, no additional clues that might explain how or why the family had ended up in that remote location. After 4 years of exposure to weather and scavengers, Any physical evidence that might have been present at the time of their deaths had been destroyed or dispersed. For investigators, the discovery of the remains was both a relief and a frustration. It confirmed that the family was dead, ending years of speculation about whether they might still be alive somewhere. But it provided no answers about who might have killed them, why they were killed, or how they ended up in such a remote location. The families of Bobby, Sherry, and Madison finally had confirmation of their worst fears. But they still had no justice, no closure, no understanding of what had happened to their loved ones in their final moments. Over 15 years later, the Jamison case remains unsolved. Finding their remains proved they had died, but not how or why. Why did they drive into the remote Sans Bois Mountains that morning? Why leave their truck and walk into the wilderness with no supplies? What happened in their final moments? The rough terrain and years of weather erased much of the evidence. For loved ones, the lack of answers is heartbreaking. Some believe it was murder. Others think it was a tragic accident. But no theory explains everything. This case reminds us that even today, people can vanish without a trace, and some mysteries may never be solved. Bobby was 44, Sherry, 40, Madison only 6. They deserve answers. But for now, the Oklahoma wilderness holds its secrets. The case remains open. If you have any information, please contact the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation.